Ruby Gatlin had been working the register at a Fuel Mart off I-40 outside Russellville, Arkansas for 11 years. 11 years of truckers paying an exact change, teenagers stealing Slim Jims, and lottery addicts scratching tickets in the parking lot. So when a boy who looked about 9 years old walked up to her counter at 7:15 on a Wednesday evening and placed a crumpled dollar bill on the glass and pointed at a pack of peanut butter crackers on the bottom shelf, she didn't think anything of it until she picked up the dollar and smoothed it flat and saw, written in blue ballpoint ink along the margin where the treasury seal meets the border, in letters so small and careful they looked like they'd been scratched by a needle, "Help me. His name is not my dad." And Ruby's hand stopped moving, and her breath caught somewhere between her ribs and her throat, and she looked up at the boy, and the boy looked at her with the kind of expression that 9-year-old children are not supposed to know how to make, and then the bell above the door jingled, and a man walked in behind him and put his hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "You about done, buddy?" And Ruby Gatlin smiled at the man and handed the boy his crackers and said, "Have a good night." And the second that door closed behind them, she picked up the phone behind the counter and dialed the one person she trusted more than the police, the biker sitting on the bench outside her store. What happened next would shut down a gas station on an Arkansas highway, bring 7 motorcycles through the Ozark foothills before sundown, and return a boy to a mother in Little Rock, who had worn the same clothes for 12 days because changing them felt like giving up. The Fuel Mart sat at the bottom of a hill where Highway 7 crosses I-40, the kind of place that exists because 2 roads happen to intersect and somebody put a gas pump there 40 years ago. 2 islands, 4 pumps, a convenience store the size of a double wide with a bait cooler by the door, and a coffee machine that hadn't worked since February. The parking lot was cracked asphalt with dandelions growing through the seams. A hand-painted sign on the door said, "No shirt, no shoes, no service." And someone had written, "No problem," underneath it in Sharpie. The air smelled like diesel and honeysuckle, and the particular brand of humidity that the Arkansas River Valley produces in late June. Thick, sweet, heavy enough to wear. Patrick Cinder Navarro was sitting on the wooden bench outside the Fuel Mart's entrance, same as he did most Wednesday evenings when the shop was closed and the ride was good. He was 46 years old, 6'1", 270 pounds, with a chest like a barrel and arms that strained the seams of his shirts even when he wasn't flexing. His beard was jet black, thick, trimmed square at the jawline, and it covered the lower half of a face that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts. A twice-broken nose, a scar through his left eyebrow from a bar fight he'd lost at 22, and dark brown eyes that didn't blink as often as most people's did. His forearms were sleeved in ink, barbed wire circling his left wrist, a detailed skull with a military police badge behind it on his right forearm, and his knuckles tattooed with faded blue letters. Left read duty, right read bound. He wore a black leather vest with the Soot Valley MC center patch, a smoldering coal over crossed wrenches, his sergeant-at-arms diamond, and a small American flag pin above his heart that he'd worn every day since he'd come home from Kandahar. Subscribe to Asphalt Angels and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this story starts with a crumpled dollar bill and a cashier who knew what to do with it. Cinder had spent 8 years in the Army as a criminal investigation division agent, the military's version of a detective, the guy they sent when a crime on base needed more than a patrol report. He'd worked theft rings, assault cases, a fraud operation in Stuttgart, and 2 deployments worth of incident investigations in Afghanistan, where the evidence was scattered and the witnesses were either lying or dead. He'd come home in 2014 with a CID commendation, a bad left knee, and a brain that couldn't stop cataloging everything it saw. He ran an auto body shop now, Navarro's Collision on Route 7, and spent his days matching paint colors and pulling dents out of quarter panels, which was about as far from criminal investigation as a man could get without leaving the planet. But the CID brain never turned off. It just ran quieter, like an engine idling in the background, always scanning, always filing, always cross-referencing. He was drinking a Mountain Dew and watching the pumps when Ruby came out the side door. She didn't come to the bench. She came to the corner of the building where the ice machine sat, and she waved him over with a motion that was half casual and half something else. Patrick. She only used his real name when something was wrong. I need you to look at something. She held out the dollar bill. He took it, smoothed it against his thigh, read the words along the margin, read them again. Help me. His name is not my dad. He looked at Ruby. Ruby was 58 years old, had raised 4 kids, buried a husband, and managed a gas station convenience store in rural Arkansas for over a decade. She did not panic. She did not exaggerate. If Ruby said something was wrong, something was wrong. When? 2 minutes ago, a boy, maybe 9, came in alone, bought crackers with this dollar. A man came in right after, put his hand on his shoulder, called him Buddy. They're in a white pickup, Arkansas plates, still at pump 2. Cinder looked around the corner. White Ford F-150, maybe 2016 or 2017. Extended cab, Arkansas plates. He couldn't read the number from this angle, but the truck was still there, still fueling. A man was standing at the pump, nozzle in hand, looking at his phone. Average height, brown hair, jeans and a gray t-shirt. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that would make you look twice. The boy? In the truck, passenger side back seat. And here was the moment. The fork that splits every one of these stories into 2 timelines. The one where somebody acts, and the one where somebody doesn't. Because Cinder's CID brain was already running the analysis. A note on a dollar bill, written small, written careful, written in a way that was designed to survive being handled without being noticed by the person who gave the kid the dollar. That wasn't impulsive. That was planned. A 9-year-old boy had thought about how to send a message, had chosen the medium, had chosen the words, had chosen the moment, and had executed it without getting caught. That level of planning in a child that age meant one thing. He'd had time to think. And kids who have time to think about how to ask for help are kids who have been in the situation long enough to learn patience. But there was always a but. What if the boy was angry at his stepfather? What if this was a custody situation and the kid was playing a game? What if, not my dad, meant something different than what it looked like on a crumpled dollar bill in the fluorescent light of a gas station? Cinder looked at the truck again. The man was hanging up the nozzle, screwing the gas cap back on, about to get in and drive away. You call 911 yet? I called you first. Call 911 now. Tell them what you told me. White Ford F-150, I'm getting the plate. He was already moving. And Ruby, don't hang up with them until a unit's on the way. He walked across the parking lot, not toward the truck, toward his bike, a 2019 Road King parked at the far end of the lot, angled so he could see the exit. He pulled out his phone and opened the camera, zoomed in on the truck's rear plate, Arkansas, 7 Charlie Delta 2461. He took the photo. Then he texted the Soot Valley group chat. Fuel Mart, Highway 7 and I-40, white F-150 AR plates 7CD2461. Kid inside wrote help on a dollar bill. Need bodies now. GPS pin. Boomer responded first. The chapter VIP, a retired Pope County firefighter who lived 6 miles up the road. 3 minutes. Then Sledge. Coming from Atkins, 10. Then Hutch. Then Axel. Then 3 more. 7 riders. Wednesday evening in the River Valley. most of them already on the road or close to it. But Boomer in 3 minutes still meant Cinder was alone with a truck that was about to leave. The man was walking to the driver's door. He was done fueling. 30 seconds and he'd be on the I-40 ramp, and 12 days of a boy's planning would dissolve into taillights on a highway. Cinder did what CID agents do when they need time and don't have authority. He created a reason to talk. He walked to the truck, not to the driver's side, to the rear. He crouched down by the right rear tire and looked at it the way a man looks at a tire that concerns him. Then he stood up and knocked twice on the side of the truck bed. The man turned. "Help you?" "Hey, brother, I think your rear tire's looking low. Might want to check it before you get on the interstate." The man looked at the tire. It wasn't low. But most people can't eyeball tire pressure to save their life, and the suggestion of a problem is enough to make anyone second guess. "Looks fine to me." "Could be. Hard to tell in this light. I've got a gauge in my saddlebag if you want to check." "I'm good. Thanks, though." "Sure thing. Where you headed?" "Memphis." "Long drive. That tire looks soft to me, but it's your call." If this story has touched your heart, share it and subscribe to Asphalt Angels, because a boy just spent his last dollar to send a message 6 words long, and a cashier who's worked the same register for 11 years knew exactly what to do with it. The man got in the truck. Cinder watched him pull his seatbelt on, watched him reach for the ignition, and then Cinder did something that was technically nothing. He walked behind the truck, not blocking it, just walking. Slowly. The way a man walks when he's heading back to his motorcycle and happens to be behind your vehicle at the exact moment you want to back out. The man waited. Cinder kept walking. Slowly. The man tapped the horn once. Cinder held up a hand. "Sorry, almost there," and kept walking at the same speed. Then the sound. A single Harley engine, Boomer's Softail Deluxe, unmuffled, coming up Highway 7 like a freight train. He turned into the Fuel Mart lot and parked his bike in the space directly behind the white truck, not blocking it, just parked there. A large man with a gray beard and forearms like fence posts, wearing a Soot Valley cut, sitting on his bike drinking from a water bottle like he had nowhere to be. The truck didn't move. Cinder walked back to the building and stood by the ice machine with Ruby, who was still on the phone with 911. He could hear the dispatcher asking about the vehicle description for the second time. Ruby was patient. Ruby repeated everything. "How long?" Cinder asked. Ruby covered the phone. "She said a unit from Pope County is 12 minutes out. State police might be closer, but she's checking." If you're watching this Asphalt Angel story, hit that hype button right now. It's free, takes 1 second, and helps this reach more people. Now, back to the story. 12 minutes. The man in the truck was sitting with the engine running, looking in his mirrors at the Harley behind him. He could go forward, pull through the pump island, and exit from the other side. But Cinder was watching, and the man knew Cinder was watching, because people who are doing something wrong can feel eyes on them the way animals feel weather. The man got out of the truck. He walked towards Cinder with his hands in his pockets and a smile that was working overtime. "That your buddy on the bike back there?" "Boomer." "Yeah, he rides with me." "Any chance he can move? I'm trying to get out of here." "He'll move when he's done with his water. Takes him a while. Bad knee, doesn't like to rush. You know how it is." "I'm in kind of a hurry." "Memphis isn't going anywhere." The smile tightened. "Look, I don't know what this is about, but I've got my son in the truck, and he's tired, and we've been driving all day, and I'd really like to get going." "What's his name?" The man didn't hesitate. "Tyler." "How old is Tyler?" 8. Cinder nodded. He'd spent 8 years in interrogation rooms. He knew what a prepared answer sounded like, versus a recalled one. The man had answers ready, which meant he'd rehearsed them, which meant he'd anticipated being asked, which meant the answers were built and not remembered. That's a great age. My nephew's 8. Hey, would you mind if I said hi to him? I've got a niece and nephew about that age. I always like talking to kids. He's sleeping. No worries. I'll just wave through the window. I'd rather you didn't. Cinder looked at the man. The smile was gone. What was left was the calculation, the rapid mental math of a person weighing options. Leave the truck, walk away, claim it's not his, stay and keep performing, escalate, wait it out. The man chose performance. Look, I get it. Big, scary biker, small kid, you're concerned. I appreciate that. But he's my son, and we're going to Memphis to see his grandmother, and I don't really need to explain myself to anyone. You don't. You're absolutely right, and I'm not asking you to explain anything. I'm just standing here by an ice machine on a nice evening. It's a free country. 2 more bikes pulled in, Sledge and Hutch, coming from Atkins, parking at the pump island on either side of the white truck. They didn't approach. They didn't speak. They got off their bikes and stretched and looked at the sky the way large, bearded, tattooed men look at the sky when they're pretending to be relaxed. The man looked at the bikes. He looked at the vests. He looked at Cinder. What is this? Wednesday. Are you blocking me in? Nobody's blocking anyone. Those guys are getting gas. Boomer's drinking water. I'm leaning on an ice machine. The Pope County Sheriff is about 8 minutes out, and if everything's fine, you'll be on your way to Memphis before dark. The man's face changed. The performance dropped like a curtain. What was underneath was not anger. It was the flat, tight expression of a man who had just realized that the net was already closed and every exit was covered, and the only thing left was the math of consequences. I want a lawyer. That's between you and the deputy. I'm just a guy who fixes cars. If Asphalt Angels has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below, and hit that hype button if you haven't already. Now, back to the story. The Pope County Sheriff's cruiser pulled in 7 minutes later. Then a second unit. Then a plain-wrap sedan from the Arkansas State Police Criminal Investigation Division that had been running a missing persons case out of Little Rock for 12 days and had received the plate number from Pope County Dispatch 90 seconds after Ruby's call. The man's name was Boyd Russell Kinney, 51 years old, no relation to the boy. The boy's name was Eli Mercer. He was 9. He'd been missing from a park in the Hillcrest neighborhood of Little Rock for 12 days. Kinney had taken Eli from a walking trail along the Arkansas River, a greenway path that Eli rode his scooter on after school, while his mother sat on a bench 30 yards away answering work emails. Kinney had watched the trail for a week. He'd timed the gaps between the bench and the curve where the path disappeared behind a stand of river birch. 19 seconds. That's how long Eli was out of his mother's line of sight. Kinney had used 14 of them, 12 days. He'd driven north into the Ozarks, staying on county roads, paying cash, switching between 3 sets of stolen plates he kept in a toolbox in the truck bed. He told Eli his mother had asked him to take care of Eli for a while. He told him they were going on a trip. He told him if he talked to anyone, the police would come and put his mother in jail. And for 10 days, Eli had believed him, the way 9-year-olds believe adults, which is completely, until suddenly, they don't. On day 11, at a Dollar General in Clarksville, Eli had found a pen on the floor of aisle 4. He'd picked it up and put it in his pocket. That night, in the truck at a rest stop, while Kinney slept in the driver's seat, Eli had taken out the single-dollar bill that Kinney had given him for the vending machine 2 days earlier and had written 6 words along the margin in letters so small they could pass for a printing defect. He'd held the pen at an angle so the ink would be thin. He'd written in the space between the treasury seal and the border, because that's where the bill was busiest, where the ink would blend in, where a man collecting change at a register wouldn't look twice. 9 years old, 12 days in a truck. And the boy had forged a message the way a prisoner forges a key. Carefully, quietly, with the patience of someone who has learned that the first chance might be the only one. He'd waited a full day for the right moment. The Fuel Mart. Wednesday evening. The cashier was a woman. He'd seen her through the window. He'd asked Kinney if he could buy crackers. Kinney had given him the $1. The same $1. And Eli had walked into a gas station and placed a crumpled bill on a glass counter in front of a woman who had been handling cash for 11 years and whose fingers knew the difference between a $1 that had been crumpled in a pocket and a $1 that had been written on. Ruby Gatlin. 11 years behind a register. 4 kids raised, 1 husband buried, 6 grandchildren who called her Nana Rube. She'd smoothed that $1 out of habit, the way cashiers smooth bills before putting them in the drawer, the way they check for counterfeits, the way their fingers read money, the way other people read books. And her fingers had stopped because the ink didn't feel right, and she'd looked, and she'd read 6 words that a 9-year-old boy had written in the margin of a $1 bill in the dark of a rest stop at 2 a.m. Help me. His name is not my dad. Jolene Mercer got the call at 7:48 p.m. She was sitting in the same clothes she'd worn for 12 days, a gray sweatshirt and jeans she'd put on the morning Eli disappeared and hadn't taken off except to shower because some part of her brain had decided that the clothes she'd been wearing when he was taken were the clothes she needed to be wearing when he came back. She was sitting on his bed. She'd been sitting on his bed every evening for 12 days, holding the pillow that still smelled like his shampoo, watching the light change on the walls, waiting for her phone to ring with something other than no new developments. The phone rang. She drove from Little Rock to Russellville in 1 hour and 36 minutes. It should have taken 2 hours. She didn't remember the drive. She remembered the phone call. She remembered the deputy's voice saying, "We have Eli, he's safe, he's at the Pope County substation." And she remembered that she didn't scream or cry or drop the phone. She said, "I'm coming." And she hung up, and she got in her car, and she drove. And the only thing she remembered about the road was that the sun was setting and it was orange. And she'd thought, he can see this sunset too. We can see the same sky again. Eli was in a back room at the substation. He was sitting in a metal folding chair at a table. A female deputy had given him a Sprite and a bag of Doritos. The Sprite was open. The Doritos were untouched. He was sitting perfectly still with his hands in his lap, looking at the table. And he wasn't crying because he'd stopped crying on day 3 and hadn't started again. Jolene came through the door. She stopped. Eli looked up, and for 3 seconds neither of them moved. The distance between the door and the table was 8 feet, but 12 days made it wider. Then Eli said, "Mom, can I have my backpack? He didn't let me bring it." That was the first thing he said. Not, "I missed you." Not, "I was scared." He asked for his backpack. Because Eli's brain was doing what children's brains do after trauma. It was reorganizing the world by starting with the smallest, most controllable thing it could find. The backpack was concrete. The backpack was before. If the backpack existed, then the before existed, and if the before existed, then maybe this was real. Jolene crossed the room. She knelt in front of the chair. Didn't pull him up, didn't grab him. Knelt down so she was looking up at him instead of down. She put both hands on his knees, the way you touch something fragile, and she said, "We'll get your backpack. I'll get you a new one. I'll get you 10. But first, I need you to look at me." Eli looked at her. His chin started to shake. Not his body, not his shoulders, just his chin. The small muscles around the jaw that are the first to go when a child finally lets the wall down. And then he leaned forward out of the chair and put his forehead against her shoulder, and his arms went around her neck, and Jolene's arms went around his back, and she held him with the focused, deliberate pressure of a woman who was memorizing the weight of her son in her arms because she'd spent 12 days forgetting what it felt like. They stayed like that on the floor of a sheriff's substation while a deputy pretended to organize a filing cabinet, and a ceiling fan turned overhead, and the Sprite went flat on the table, and neither of them said anything because there wasn't a word in any language for what 12 days apart and 8 feet of distance, and a crumpled dollar bill had cost them and given them back. Cinder met Jolene in the parking lot an hour later. Boomer and Sledge were still there, leaning against their bikes, smoking, quiet. Hutch had gone for food. The sun was down. The parking lot was lit by a single sodium light that made everything look orange. Jolene walked out with Eli beside her. Eli was holding her hand, tight, both of his around one of hers, the grip of a child who is not letting go again. He saw the bikes. He saw the vests. He saw Cinder standing there with his tattooed knuckles and his squared-off beard, and his vest patches catching the sodium light. Jolene looked at Cinder. "The deputy told me what happened, that a cashier found a note and called you, that you kept him there. Ruby found it. She called me. I just talked to the man about his tires for a while." Jolene's eyes filled. She was still holding Eli's hand. She looked at Cinder the way people look at the person who was standing between their child and gone. Not with gratitude, not with relief, but with something deeper and harder to name, something that lives in the space between what happened and what almost happened. "He wrote it on a dollar bill," she said. "A deputy showed me. He wrote it so small. How did she even see it?" Ruby smooths every bill. 11 years behind that register. Her fingers caught the ink before her eyes did. Jolene let go of Eli's hand, the first time she'd released it since the substation, and stepped toward Cinder and hugged him. Cinder didn't wrap both arms. He put his right hand on the back of her head and held it there, steady, heavy, the way you hold something that needs an anchor. His left hand stayed at his side. He closed his eyes for 2 seconds. Then he opened them and stepped back and looked at Eli. "That was a brave thing you did. The dollar bill. That was smart." Eli looked at him. "I almost used it on the vending machine. I was hungry. But I thought—" He stopped, swallowed. "I thought if I was going to spend it, I should spend it on the right thing." Nobody said anything for a long time after that. The Soot Valley MC of Russellville, Arkansas, now sponsors a program called The Dollar Line. At gas stations and truck stops along the I-40 corridor between Little Rock and Fort Smith, they leave stacks of dollar bills in tip jars, and at counters with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children hotline number written in the margin, 1-800-843-5678, in small, careful letters. The bills circulate. They end up in pockets and wallets and cash registers across the river valley. Every one of them carries a phone number. Every one of them is a door. At the annual Soot Valley Charity Ride, Ruby Gatlin stands behind a folding table and teaches people how to read money. Not the denominations, not the security features, but the things that people write on bills when they have no other paper and no other voice. Eli Mercer is 10 now. He's in 4th grade in Little Rock. He rides his scooter on the Greenway again, the same one, and his mother walks beside him now instead of sitting on the bench. He doesn't talk about the 12 days. He doesn't have to. His therapist says he's processing, and processing looks different for every kid. And for Eli, it looks like asking for his backpack first and the hug second, putting the world back in order one small, concrete thing at a time. He sent Ruby a thank you card 3 months later. Inside, taped to the paper, was a dollar bill. On the margin, in the same small handwriting, he'd written, "Thank you for reading it." Ruby keeps it in the register, not in the drawer, taped to the side, where she can see it every shift, right next to the photos of her grandchildren. She has not spent it. She will not spend it. Be the one who reads between the lines. Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that sometimes a child's only voice is the one they hide in plain sight, please share it. Subscribe to Asphalt Angels for more stories proving that the person behind the counter might be the most important person in the room. Tell us in the comments, have you ever found a message where you least expected it?